Thank you. You've been very clear about the nature of the problem. Well, with me in the studio are David Allison from the family law group Resolution and Emma Pryer, who's the news and celebrity editor of More magazine, who thinks the law could put a lot of pressure on young couples. David, first of all, why does it take a law change? I mean, people can get round this in various ways. They can write wills, can they not? And if they want the rights of being married, they have to take the responsibilities of it as well.
People can certainly make wills, and yes, they could deal with the issue that perhaps Rosemary had there. And yes, people can marry. People, of course, don't marry for all sorts of reasons. Rosemary was saying that they got engaged, they planned to marry, and actually it didn't happen, and that's not uncommon. People plan to marry when they can afford it, perhaps, or it just perhaps one of them is keen to marry and the other isn't. And then many years later, if the relationship goes wrong, that person might find themselves quite vulnerable.
Can you explain what, in law, a cohabiting couple would be? I mean, how long would you have to be in the same house in order to be cohabiting? A weekend? A month?
Well, certainly longer than that.
Longer than that?
I mean, the Law Commission is asking for proposals, for views on what a minimum period should be if there is to be a minimum period. But certainly what the proposals are intended is real safety net provision. We're not talking about opening up marriage to cohabitants. It's not that at all. This is really to protect vulnerable people. So if there are children, or if say a woman gives up work and cooks and cleans for 20 years, and then at the end of that relationship, which may have lasted 20, 30 years, there's no real earning capacity or capital. It's that sort of provision, those people.
Emma, what do you think of this?
I think the timescale is really important. I mean, if you're a young 20-something like me, and you've been with your partner for a year, and suddenly you're being told if you split up your assets that could go to him, that could be really... He's got
his dibs on your stereo system straight away.
Exactly. That would be really off-putting. It would actually put me off wanting to move in with someone. You'd feel a real pressure. You might want to move in and just take your time to get to know that person even better. And suddenly you're being told, after 2 years, if things go wrong, you know, he could have your property. And I think young people have got student loans to pay off and things. The last thing they want is to be paying off an ex. But obviously, if you're cohabiting in the long term, I think legal protection is a fantastic idea.
Yeah, I suppose that's the difference, isn't it? If you listen to Rosemary there, most people would say, oh, that's terribly unfair.
Yes.
If she paid into this was a very strong relationship, it went on for a long time. But there are other relationships which maybe are not strong. Maybe that's why, because people choose not to marry for different reasons.
Absolutely. And the sort of relationship that Emma's talking about, those people wouldn't be able to make claims under these proposals. They wouldn't get past the economic disadvantage test, to give it a lawyer's term, which means they have to show they've suffered as a consequence of decisions taken jointly during the relationship, such as giving up work, bringing up children.
But there seems lots of tests and guidelines, though, doesn't there? It seems a bit frilly. I mean, you have to be very careful when they're drafting this, that they really stipulate what cohabitees have to, you know, stick up for.
Well, exactly. I was going to say, isn't the whole point of being a cohabitee that you live together because you don't want the state to be involved, or you don't want the church to be involved, and with respect, you don't want lawyers to be involved either, do you?
Exactly. I completely agree with you.
Well, I entirely agree with that to a large extent as well. But there are, of course, a number of people that don't marry for other reasons. As I say, maybe they think they're going to get married at some point, or maybe one of them wants to marry and the other doesn't, perhaps because they've had their fingers burnt before. But if that person ends up in a vulnerable position, they ought to have some just basic protection. That's all we're talking about. We're not talking about sharing huge wealth.
But if I read what you say correctly, the people who have suffered as Rosemary have, and other people will be compelled to make representations and will make them very clear, and people will feel that there should be changes. But the law of unintended consequences will be that somebody in their early 20s who doesn't want to get involved in this might be affected by it.
I just think it could really put young couples moving in together, you know, put them off wanting to move in with their partner. I think it puts such a pressure on a relationship when you're young, but we're talking about two different types of relationship and different age groups as well.
I don't think actually Emma and I really disagree on the principles of this. Yeah. And actually the proposals that the Law Commission are putting forward talk about cohabitation contracts and the ability to opt out. So if you make the conscious decision to opt out of these limited rights, then you should be able to do that.
It takes a bit of the fun out of romance, though, doesn't it?
Well, indeed.
Especially young love.
Well, perhaps we can't solve the problems of young love today. Anyway, thank you both very much.
Thank you.